Hey, this is Dave DeCamp from antiwar.com. This is anti-war news for Monday, April 7th, 2025. All right, first thing, we have completed our fundraiser, so I want to thank everybody who pitched in to help us reach our goal. It went really well this time around. We never know how these things are going to go, but this one went well. So this is how antiwar.com is able to do it. This is how I'm able to give you this content, to do this show, is because of our very generous readers and now viewers and listeners of this show. So thanks everybody. Again, I really, really appreciate it. So we have a lot of stuff to go over. Lots of stuff went on over the weekend. The first story at the top of antiwar.com today: the U.S. deploys a second THAAD missile defense system to Israel. So the U.S. has deployed a second terminal high-altitude area defense battery to Israel. And this was reported by multiple Israeli and Arab media outlets over the weekend. And so this is a THAAD air defense system. And Israeli security sources also said that the U.S. deployed 2 Patriot air defense batteries to Israel. And that wasn't reported by all the outlets, but I wanted to mention it. So far, this hasn't been confirmed by the U.S., these deployments. But again, this was all over Israeli media, and people were tracked U.S. cargo flights, military cargo flights to Israel. And U.S. officials did previously tell the Wall Street Journal that the U.S. was sending Patriot air defense systems to the region as part of this military buildup. And if the U.S. really sent 2 Patriot batteries, I mean, that's a lot of equipment, and that would take a lot of personnel to operate that equipment. And this is part of this overall military buildup we're seeing in the Middle East amid these threats against Iran. This has also included sending a second aircraft carrier, all the B-2 bombers to Diego Garcia, and other unspecified air assets that the Pentagon said that it was sending. So the THAAD missile defense system, if you remember last year, the Biden administration sent one of these and about 100 troops to operate it to Israel in October 2024. And this was as Israel was planning to attack Iran. So just a few weeks after the U.S. deployed this THAAD system in October 2024, Israel launched airstrikes against Iran. And now, and that one is still there. So now they're sending a second one. Again, all this talk, these reports about a potential U.S. and Israeli attack on Iran. And again, when Biden did it, they said they were sending about 100 troops to operate it. So if they're sending another THAAD system and Patriot batteries, that means they're going to need to send more U.S. troops as well. So we're really seeing this buildup for war in the region, and this is a very strong, show of support for Israel amid its genocidal war in Gaza. And not just that, also it's stepped up military operations in the West Bank, the occupation of southern Lebanon, the invasion of southern Syria. The U.S. is supporting all of these things by giving Israel military aid and giving them extra air defenses. So another concerning sign about this potential for, an attack on Iran to happen. All right, so the next one here: Netanyahu arrives in the U.S. and will meet with Trump on Monday. So Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu arrived in Washington on Sunday, where he is set to meet with President Trump and is expected to discuss the genocidal war on Gaza, Iran, and recently imposed U.S. tariffs on Israel. So according to the Times of Israel, Netanyahu, who is wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes in Gaza, headed to a meeting with U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick upon his arrival in Washington. Netanyahu is set to meet with President Trump and his Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff on Monday, and Ron Dermer, who's Netanyahu's advisor, will also attend this meeting. And Netanyahu flew to the U.S. from Hungary, and before leaving Hungary, Netanyahu said that he would speak with Trump about, quote, hostages, achieving victory in Gaza, and the tariff regime that's been imposed on Israel, end quote. Netanyahu's office also said the two leaders would discuss Israel-Turkey relations amid these tensions over Syria. We saw these reports of Turkey taking over a specific base, the T4 base in Syria, and then Israel bombed it, I think, the next day and said it was a message to Turkey. So tensions are very high there. And Netanyahu's office also said that they would discuss the Iranian threat. So now, again, I mentioned some of the concerning signs of a potential attack on Iran, and now, this is something that they're definitely going to discuss. And you remember the last time that Netanyahu visited, it was in early February. This is his second trip to the U.S. in the second Trump administration, and it was during their press conference that Trump announced this big plan for the U.S. to take over Gaza for the ethnic cleansing, and he repeatedly said that the Palestinians have to be removed permanently from Gaza. So we'll see what comes of this trip. All right, so the next one here, Israeli forces kill a 14-year-old American citizen in the West Bank. So this article's from AFP. A Palestinian official told AFP that Israeli forces shot dead a teenager holding U.S. citizenship in the occupied West Bank on Sunday. So there was initial reports said that he was killed by an Israeli settler, but this seems to be the latest thing. The Palestinian officials saying he was killed by Israeli troops, and the Israeli military is claiming that it killed a terrorist who threw rocks at cars, but they shot and killed a 14-year-old boy, a 14-year-old Palestinian boy who's also an American citizen. And two other boys were wounded, were also shot and wounded. The Israeli military claimed that they shot terrorists, as they call them, who hurled rocks toward the highway, thus endangering civilian drivers. One of the boys said that he was shot by a soldier while collecting fruit near the town, and that was another 14-year-old. I believe they were all 14-year-olds, so two survived and one was killed. And again, two of them were American citizens, including the boy who was killed. So here's this happens quite often, that the Israeli military or Israeli settlers kill Americans in the West Bank. Ayşenur Agi, who was a Turkish American, she was born in Turkey but moved to the U.S. before her first birthday, grew up in the U.S., went to college in the U.S. She went over to the West Bank and got shot in the head by Israeli soldiers. And this just doesn't come up. I mean, I doubt Trump is going to bring this up to Netanyahu tomorrow. They make all this fuss about the Israeli, IDF soldiers who were taken hostage by Hamas, who have American citizenship, people that left the U.S. to go join a foreign military. But whenever anything like this happens in the West Bank, it's just never a big deal to the U.S. They're just going to keep providing the bombs and bullets to the military that did this. But I'll try to follow up on that story, get some more details on exactly what happened tomorrow. All right, so the next one here, Trump shares video of strike on Yemen gathering. So this is kind of a big thing that happened over the weekend. President Trump shared this video. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, of overhead, looks like drone footage of an overhead shot of what is a gathering of people, standing in a big circle. And then there's a big explosion, which is a U.S. airstrike, and it basically leaves a crater. And it looks like, most of those people were probably killed in this strike. And so Trump posted this on social media, and he said, "These Houthis gathered for instructions on an attack. Oops, there will be no attack by these Houthis. They will never sink our ships again." So that was Trump's tweet. He put it out on Truth Social, all the social media. And a lot of people started immediately pointing out that the way that this group of people was gathered is a common way that Yemeni tribes gather for meetings and for religious gatherings. If you got to think about it, if you are the Houthis, if you're their military, and you're under constant U.S. bombing and surveillance, are you going to, gather in a big circle? I mean, I believe if you count this is about 70 people in this circle. Are they going to gather out in a remote open area to discuss their war plans? He's claiming that they gathered for an instruction for an attack. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. But he shared this, and then the response from Yemen. On Saturday, Yemen's Sabah news agency reported that the footage shared by President Trump that showed a U.S. airstrike in Yemen hit a religious gathering, not a Houthi military meeting as the president claimed. Trump posted the video on his social media, which showed a group of people gathered in a large circle who were then bombed. As I mentioned what he said. He also said that they will never sink an American ship again, but they've never sank an American ship as far as we're aware. I don't think that's something the U.S. would be able to cover up either if that happened. So in response to the post, a source told Sabah that the video showed an airstrike on a gathering for Eid, the Muslim holiday that marks the end of Ramadan. So these were the last days of March when this would have happened then if this was Eid. The Sabah report said, quote, the source explained that the video clip published by the criminal Trump, claiming it was a gathering of military leaders, was merely an event for a social Eid visit in Hodeidah province. The source emphasized that those present at that gathering had no connection to the operations carried out by the Yemeni armed forces, which are implementing the decision to ban navigation on ships linked to the American and Israeli enemy, as the criminal Trump claimed, end quote. Mohammed al-Houthi, a senior member of Ansar Allah's political council, said that the video was evidence of a U.S. intelligence failure. He said, quote, the video clip published by Trump in the situation of the visitors attests to the falsity of what he said. The video he published is in fact the targeting of an Eid social gathering, end quote. A member of the U.S. and Saudi-backed Yemeni government in exile, which is based in Saudi Arabia, claimed the U.S. strike killed 70 Houthi fighters and several Iranian advisors, but offered no evidence for the claim. At the time of the attack, there were no reports in Yemeni media of a major casualty event in Hodeidah. So the U.S. military has shared virtually no details about its bombing campaign in Yemen and did not offer specifics about this video that Trump posted. The president shared the footage on the same day that the New York Times reported that the daily airstrikes in Yemen have had limited success as the Houthis are not deterred and are not backing down. So I think it might have been a response to that. Oh, let's share this video of us killing a bunch of people. You know, that'll show them that we're having success. And we know that this bombing campaign has had a heavy toll of civilians. But I mean, it looks like Trump just shared a video of a war crime that he committed here. It's just, and the way he responds here, I mean, even if you could say that this attack, let's just say it was a justified bombing and all these people were killed, to like talk about it in this way, it's just like really sick. It's really, really sick stuff. And again, another thing you see, like when people share photos of these tribal gatherings in Yemen, a lot of times you'll see people with guns. In Yemen, it's pretty common to see a man, you know, if you're a man, to carry a gun. They have like the most guns per capita. I don't know what the stats are these days, but I remember a few years ago, they had the most guns per capita out of any country in the world besides the U.S. We beat them. So there's a lot of guns in Yemen. It's common to carry a gun. And there's also a chance, you know, not denying that they could have been, you know, could be aligned with the Houthis, could be Houthi supporters, Ansar Allah supporters, but there's no evidence here that they were involved in any attacks or plotting an attack. Again, if you have underground military infrastructure and you're firing missiles and drones, why hold a meeting in a big circle with 70 people in a remote area to discuss your plans? It just doesn't make any sense, but this is what Trump is claiming. And a lot of his supporters just eating this stuff up. It's really pathetic to see. All right, so the next one here, 4 reported killed by U.S. airstrike on home in Yemen's capital. So at least 4 people were killed by a U.S. airstrike on a residential building in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a on Sunday night, and this was also reported by Yemen's Sabah news agency. The report said that 2 women were among the 4 killed and another 23 were injured, including 11 women and children. The attack also damaged multiple homes in the area, so more civilians killed and injured here by the U.S. bombing in Yemen. And Yemen's health ministry said earlier in the day that overnight U.S. airstrikes on the northern Sana'a province killed at least 2 civilians and wounded 4 others. The strikes hit a solar panel shop and a nearby home. You could see the aftermath of the strike on this solar panel shop. Again, this is in the northern province of Sana'a. Residential buildings have been a frequent target of U.S. airstrikes since President Trump launched the bombing campaign on March 15th. And I mentioned that administration officials celebrated the bombing of a residential building in that Signal chat. Mike Waltz claimed that the Houthis' top missile guy just walked into a building where his girlfriend lived, and he said it was collapsed, and everybody cheered. Again, just really sick stuff from this administration. And so the Houthis, who are officially known as Ansar Allah, they are not backing down in the face of the daily U.S. airstrikes, despite claims from the White House that the bombing campaign has been incredibly successful. Early Sunday morning, Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saree announced more attacks on U.S. warships in the region. And so far, there's been no indication that any U.S. warships have been hit. But again, an important thing to keep stressing here, we don't know anything. They're not telling us anything about this bombing campaign, about what targets they're claiming to hit, about the situation for the U.S. sailors that are in the Red Sea. We don't know anything about it. The cost, we know nothing because they're not being transparent at all about this new war. And we'll get more into the cost because there was a report over the weekend about that in another story here. But there's constant bombing every single day, and we're seeing a lot of civilian casualties. It's very similar. It looks a lot like the Saudi bombing campaign, which was just about as brutal as possible. All right, so the next one here, the Pentagon admits strikes have limited success in Yemen. So this one's from Kyle Anzalone. He wrote this on Friday. So Pentagon officials are telling Congress behind closed doors that it does not believe the new military campaign in Yemen has degraded the Houthis' military capability. Within a month, the operation will cost over $1 billion. So within a month of it starting on March 15th, the cost is going to be over $1 billion. So according to the New York Times, the Pentagon informed Capitol Hill that the new operation against the Houthis has had limited success. The Houthis have reinforced their underground bunker, frustrating the White House. They have, underground military facilities. Again, another reason why they're not going to be all meeting out in the open and yelling at each other across to tell them, what the plan is, what they're going to do next. So the private assessment to Congress is far different from the public messages from the White House, as we've been covering. The White House and Trump claiming that it's incredibly successful. And again, this has been daily strikes every single day. And anyone, how easy was this to predict? When this thing started, I said, as a lot of other people said, that this isn't going to stop the Houthis. If anything, it's going to it's going to increase their attacks. They're not going to back down. It's going to just escalate things, because that's what happened when Biden started bombing them in January 2024. And we know there was a 7-year bombing campaign, ground campaign, and blockade against the Houthis that was backed by the U.S. And the Houthis survived that. So this is not a problem that Trump can just bomb away. I think he was convinced by his people that you could just ramp up the airstrikes. Biden didn't hit him hard enough, and we'll take care of him. But obviously that's not the case here. And again, this is just a totally criminal war, unauthorized by Congress, illegal. It would be immoral anyway if it was authorized by Congress, because for a lot of reasons, but one being the way that they're conducting it. And also the fact that they're doing this to ensure Israel can continue slaughtering Palestinians. That's what this is all about. And it's just a complete failure. And I know, the cost is one thing. I think it's important to talk about how much this stuff costs. But on the other hand, that cost is profit for people, in the military industrial complex. So that's part of this as well. Another thing driving this. And that was one thing in Trump's first administration, how he defended supporting the Saudis in Yemen. He said, they're buying all these weapons, so we might as well keep selling them, even if they're dropping them on little kids all the time. All right, so the next one here, Israeli strikes on Gaza kill many children. So I'm going to get into some pretty heavy Gaza stuff here. There's a video in here that's pretty rough, just a warning. So on Sunday, the Israeli military killed at least 43 Palestinians in Gaza, medical sources told Al Jazeera, as U.S.-backed Israeli strikes continue to pound targets across the Strip. Photos and videos coming out of Gaza show that many children were among the dead and wounded. According to the Palestinian news agency Wafa, at least 9 children were killed by Israeli shelling and airstrikes on the Al-Tufa neighborhood of Gaza City. So I'll play a little bit of this video. It's just mostly people mourning children who were killed here. It's just really, really sad. And just more dead children being brought into the hospital. And this is at the Al-Ali Baptist Hospital in Gaza City. And I believe these are the victims of one strike that killed 11 Palestinians, and 9 of them were children. So just, again, a huge toll on children. And there were heavy Israeli attacks in southern Gaza. At least 19 were killed in Khan Yunis. Israeli troops have expanded their ground offensive in the south. They're capturing the territory between Khan Yunis and Rafah, putting Rafah under a total, surrounding it and putting it under siege. Gaza's government media office said on Sunday that since Israel restarted its genocidal war on March 18th, which it did with full U.S. support, 490 Palestinian children have been killed. The office said in a statement that the overall death toll has reached 1,350. So 490 Palestinian children killed in about 20 days, all with the full support of the U.S. So also on Sunday, the Israeli military said that 10 rockets were fired from Gaza, an attack that Hamas's military wing, the Al-Qassem's brigade, took credit for. Most projectiles were intercepted, but one landed in the Israeli city of Ashkelon. According to the Times of Israel, one man was lightly wounded. It's amazing that they actually print this stuff. One man was lightly wounded, and several other Israelis were treated for acute anxiety. So, I mean, you just see the contrast between, you got people in Israel going to the hospital for, acute anxiety, when you see the hospitals in Gaza just full of children, and I mean, just as horrific as can be. But of course, Israel, I'm sure, is going to be escalating in response to this rocket attack, which was the most significant one in months. All right, so the next one here, full video of Israeli attack on Gaza medics. So this is a YouTube video of the, if you remember the story of 15 Gaza rescue workers being executed by Israeli troops. They went missing around Rafah for a long time, and then their bodies were found in a shallow grave. They basically were executed by Israeli troops, and they tried to cover it up by burying them, and their ambulances too. They tried to cover it all up. Their bodies were found, and one of the rescue workers who was executed had his phone on him and was recording when they pulled up. The Israeli military story was that, oh yeah, we shot at some vehicles, but they were suspicious vehicles. They were driving at us. They didn't have any sirens on. They actually said in their statement that they didn't have sirens on. Well, if you watch this video, they very clearly are ambulances because they have sirens on. And when you see people get out of the car, they are in uniform and everything, and it's really kind of horrific to watch. And this is from Middle East Eye. They have the subtitles and everything. It's really sad, and you hear the gunfire. Again, you see them getting out of the car, clearly marked rescue workers, and they just get gunned down and slaughtered by the IDF. So I'm curious to see what the U.S., because if you remember, I had a story on the State Department's response to the execution was that, oh, it's all Hamas's fault. Everything that happens in Gaza is Hamas's fault. Let's see if they still say that now that this video's come out. I wouldn't be surprised if they do. All right, so the next one here, Israeli official says that the Palestinians will be removed from Gaza. So this one's from Kyle again. He wrote this on Friday. So an Israeli official told Haaretz that Israel plans to expel Palestinians from Gaza after hostages are freed and Hamas is eliminated. Essentially, what this official is saying is that, yeah, and I think this has been clear from what we've seen from specifically Katz, the Israeli defense minister, what he's been saying publicly, is that they're not just saying the hostages have to be released. They're not just saying Hamas has to be eliminated or expelled from Gaza. They're also saying that the Palestinians got to go too. A senior Israeli official who's traveling with Netanyahu told Haaretz, quote, "What we would like to see is that we rescue the hostages, eliminate Hamas, and that there is a large-scale opportunity for voluntary migration," end quote. And of course, they're calling it voluntary migration, but just look at any picture of Gaza and you know that it is anything but voluntary. And so I think, again, they've made it clear. One thing that Katz said specifically that I remember is in one of his videos threatening the whole population of Gaza was, you have to free the hostages, rise up against Hamas, expel them, and then you'll be given the opportunity to leave Gaza, basically. And I think this is one thing that Netanyahu and the Israeli government has really been emboldened by Trump, saying so many times that, yeah, the Palestinians have got to go. Again, making it sound like it's going to be this great thing for them. But they've totally emboldened the Israeli government to pursue this as a real goal. All right, so the next one here, Israeli troops move deeper into Syria. This one is from Jason Ditz. So Israeli troops continue to move deeper into Syria, raising consternation among the locals as they detain civilians on suspicion of terrorism and set up roadblocks to prevent villagers from accessing their lands inside the newly occupied buffer zone. That buffer zone is getting bigger and bigger, crossing beyond the demilitarized zone between Syria and the occupied Golan Heights, and as a result is also shrinking the amount of land that local residents are allowed to access. Israel invaded in December after the ouster of the Assad government, and its ever-expanding occupation has shown increasing signs of being more or less permanent. Though the Syrians involved are viewing it in the lens of an occupation, the Israeli army is looking to brand it as a festive opportunity for Israelis to travel during Passover. So the Israeli army is now offering hiking tours of some of the newly occupied part of Syria, calling them Friends of Excursions, trips where Israeli forces will escort Israeli hikers into the closest 2.5 kilometers of Syria. So, I mean, that sounds like they're getting ready to start moving some settlers in if they're going to start doing this stuff already. And reportedly, the tours for Passover were very popular and have sold out already. And Israel's Northern Command says that many more such tours will be offered in the future. The IDF also announced that Israeli troops are carrying out what they're calling these defensive operations in Syria, destroying infrastructure, dismantling old abandoned Syrian military assets. So the invasion of southern Syria continues. All right, the next one here, 2 killed, several wounded as Israel attacks southern Lebanon. So Israel has continued its attacks. This is another one from Jason. On southern Lebanon throughout the weekend, killing a Hamas commander and his family in a drone strike on Sidon overnight, Friday into Saturday. On Sunday, the strikes were a lot less specific about who they were targeting, but they killed at least 2 people and wounded several others. So Hamas, they confirmed that one of their commanders, as they call him, was killed by the strike. He was also killed with his wife and kids. The 2 people were killed in an attack on an engineering truck headed toward Nakora. This is the other strikes. Israel claimed that the people were Hezbollah operatives, but in reality, the vehicles targeted in various attacks appear to be involved in construction and repair, as they are working to fix agriculture areas destroyed in the recent Israeli occupation. Other attacks targeted a bulldozer and people working in the farmland area, wounding several more. So the strikes on Lebanon continue. All right, the next one here, Rubio says Russia must decide soon if it wants peace. Another one that Kyle wrote up on Friday. Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggested the U.S. was looking for Russian President Vladimir Putin to move forward with negotiations on talks with Ukraine more quickly. Speaking to reporters at NATO headquarters in Brussels, he said, quote, "What we're not interested in, and I'm not accusing them of this, I'm just telling you what we're not interested in is negotiations about negotiations, that we're not going to continue this forever. I think it was more an explanation of this is our timeline, and at some point it will be clear whether you want peace or you don't want peace, and that time is coming. It's pretty short," end quote. And so Rubio has said kind of similar things, not so much that the time's coming that it's going to be short. I mean, this sounds more like it's going to be over soon, and then that's going to be that. We're just going to continue the proxy war and keep funding and arming Ukraine. And while Rubio said that the U.S. position was not threatening, he went on to say that Congress could add new sanctions on Russia if Moscow is perceived not to be advancing toward talks with Kiev quickly enough. He said, quote, "Members of Congress have begun to file bills to increase sanctions. So there's going to be growing pressure from Capitol Hill to impose sanctions that we're not going to be able to stop if, in fact, we're not making progress toward peace," end quote. It's another thing. There was a sanctions bill that would put like 500% tariffs on any country that imports Russian oil. That was introduced and sponsored by 50 senators, which is just huge, big bipartisan group. So that's something that would easily pass through Congress. So not a good sign here, as it seems like the negotiations are faltering. And then the next one here, Zelensky slams U.S. response to Russian strike that killed children. So on Saturday, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky criticized the U.S. for its response to a Russian missile strike that hit the central Ukrainian city of Kryvyi. I always butcher this city. It's Kryvyi Rih, I believe, as the Ukrainians pronounce it, or Kryvyi Rogan, as the Russians say it. And it's a central city. So Ukrainian officials said the missile strike killed 20 people, including 9 children, and injured dozens more. Russia took credit for the attack and claimed that it targeted Ukrainian military commanders and foreign military advisors while they were meeting at a restaurant. The Russian Defense Ministry claimed that the strike, quote, made the enemy lose up to 85 service members and military officers from foreign countries, end quote, but offered no evidence for this assertion. And also, I mean, if you're going to bomb a restaurant, there's going to be civilians killed. There's going to be civilian casualties, obviously. So U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink, responded to the attack by writing on X, quote, horrified that tonight a ballistic missile struck near a playground and restaurant. This is why the war must end, end quote. So Zelensky slammed the U.S. ambassador for not mentioning Russia by name. And you could tell he was also annoyed by her saying that this is why the war must end. He said, quote, unfortunately, the reaction of the U.S. Embassy was an unpleasant surprise. Such a powerful country, such a powerful nation, and such a weak reaction. They are afraid even to say the word Russia, speaking about a missile that killed children. Yes, the war must end, but to end it, we must not be afraid to call things by their names, end quote. So Zelensky called for more pressure and sanctions on Russia and for President Trump to help Ukraine acquire more air defenses. And then on Sunday, Brink wrote another post about the same attack and called it a Russian missile attack. I don't know if Zelensky, gave her any approval for that. But, Zelensky's, this criticism of the U.S. from him, it seems like that blow up at the Oval Office, it was just the perfect opportunity for the U.S. to say, all right, that's it. Negotiate, end the war, end the killing, make a deal, and this will end. And the way to make Zelensky do that is by cutting the U.S. weapons and intelligence support. But all that has been resumed, and the war just keeps going, and the two sides are just completely on opposite sides, and Zelensky doesn't seem to be willing to make any real concessions, the concessions that he would have to make for a lasting peace deal with Russia. And in the meantime, Ukrainians and Russians continue to die. All right, so that is it for the news for today. Please go check out our Viewpoints, one from David Stockman, Why America Don't Need No Stinking Allies. One from Michael Vlahos, America's New Lost Cause, about the war in Ukraine. One from Caitlin Johnstone, Trump shares murder-style snuff film on 15th anniversary of collateral murder. And that is, my mind went to the collateral murder video released by WikiLeaks of the U.S. airstrike in Iraq that killed Reuters journalists when Trump shared that. And apparently he shared it on the 15th anniversary of that. And he shared it himself. They didn't need any leaks to show that airstrike. One from Jonathan Cook, the graver Israel's atrocities, the quieter BBC grows. And our spotlight from Haaretz, pogromists rule the West Bank. So please go check all that out. Again, thank you everyone for helping with our fundraiser. Other ways you can support this show at antiwar.com. Share this show. Tell your friends about antiwar.com. Like, subscribe, comment. All that stuff helps. Follow us on social media. I hope everybody had a good weekend. I will be back tomorrow with some more news. Thanks for listening.